It's 1997. You're sailing from Honolulu to Santa Barbara when suddenly a hurricane blows you off course. You begin to notice little objects in the water all around you. On a closer look, you notice the objects to be trash. Congratulations, you just discovered the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. Surely it was discovered by Captain Charles Moore. He described the patch as plastic soup, which is more accurate than the common belief that it is an island of plastic or marine debris. The Great Pacific Garbage Patch is more akin to a vortex. If you were to look underneath the water, you would see a whirlpool of litter that's twice the size of Texas. To put in perspective how much plastic waste is in our ocean, I want you to visualize a garbage truck. And I want you to visualize that truck dumping its contaminants into the ocean every minute. According to Vinnie Lau, who has a doctorate in oceanography from the University of Washington, and as well as directs various plastic prevention projects, she goes on to state that there's an estimated 150 million metric tons of plastic in our oceans. She also states that yearly we dump 11 million metric tons of plastic in our oceans, and if we continue to do nothing, by 2040, that number will increase to 29 million metric tons yearly. Plastic pollution and other marine debris are an ever-ongoing issue that has been present since the early 1960s. If action does not take place on a global scale, then all life on the planet will ultimately be affected. During this speech, we will be covering the myths of plastic, the failures of recycling, effective recycling, and what the average consumer can do. At one point or another in our lives, we have all used plastic straws, or plastic containers, or disposable water bottles. Have we ever stopped to consider what happens to this plastic after its purpose has been used? Well, a common myth about plastic is that it takes hundreds of years to degrade. And according to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, this is true. However, it doesn't biodegrade. Plastic will continue to break down into smaller and smaller molecules, but never truly disappearing. This is how we get nano or microplastics, which can be the size of a pencil eraser cap and is 5 millimeters. So, can recycling help? Well, in 2021, U.S. households generated 51 million tons of plastic waste, but only recycled 2.4 million tons. And why is that? Well, up to 10,000 different additives can be found in plastics. This can be due to certain characteristics, such as the coloring, and when the wrong contaminants are placed in the wrong batch, this can ruin the entire batch. What if I live inland? Does my waste affect the oceans? Well, according to Gianluca Ferrajo, nearly 80% of marine plastic litter comes from inland. This is due to the mismanagement of our waste disposal systems and recycling systems. In the 1950s, we generated 2 million tons of plastic. Now we generate 450 million tons of plastic. According to this graph, globally only 9% of plastic waste is really recycled and 22% is mismanaged. As you can see, most of our plastic ends up in landfills. This graph demonstrates country by country how each of us manages our plastic, the world being at the bottom. So how do we make plastic recycling effective? Well, there's the extended producer responsibility, which places responsibility on the industry even post-consumer stage, as well as the deposit return system, which places a tax on plastic products and reimbursement is given at deposit zones. This is very present in Europe, especially in Germany. And then there's also California's plastic ban, which aims to eliminate all plastic shopping bans by 2026. And in 2022, they signed into effect the Plastic Pollution Prevention and Packaging Producer Responsibility Act, which aims to sell 25% less single-use plastics, All single-use plastic, packaging, and foodware must be recyclable or compostable. And then the state itself aims to recycle 25% of its plastic waste. The goal is to be reached by 2032. While these laws are a step in the right direction, they have only taken effect in California. If we want to solve this problem, it cannot be done individually. I will always say limiting our consumption and being aware consumers is a net positive. It just isn't enough. If we wish to limit our consumption as a whole, we need global legislation to attack the problem at its source. Up to 50% of the world's plastic waste comes from big oil companies alone. As consumers, we need to support biodegradable and sustainable options. These should not be a privilege for those that can afford it, except it should be a standard. So in conclusion, will you please raise your hand if you agree that plastic waste from our ocean is important? Will you keep that hand up if you pledge to limit your consumption of plastics and be an aware consumer? If you can do that, will you also be an advocate, support sustainable options, and legislation against plastic production? And I want you to also remember that the real one to blame is the producers, not the consumers. Thank you.